What's going on, everybody? My name is Zach, aka Ffancrzy, and I'm here to bring you my team builder for the Pokemon Speedruns Draft League versus Team Realgam Tower Tyranitars with Coach Geno. If you guys don't know what's going on with this draft league, I'll give you the briefest summary I can. There was it's a competitive 1v1, competitive singles 6v6. We ahead of time drafted a team of 11 Pokemon based off of having Pokemon in certain tiers. So there's tiers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We were limited to how many Pokemon in each tier we could have. There's a bunch of like specific numbers on those, but the breakdown is you can have up to one of each of everything except for tier 3. You can have two of those. Then you have a Mega that you're locked into, and no one else you can't use any other Pokemon as a Mega, and that Pokemon has to be your Mega that you bring. And then lastly, you can have 4 extra slots that can be any of the tiers, but there's certain point totals that prevent you from just stacking all tier 1. So basically, if you take a tier 1, you're more likely to take a bunch of lower tiers in addition to that for the remaining 3. And lastly, you are allowed to bring any 6 Pokemon of your 11. You can also not bring a Mega at all, but that's the only one you can bring as a Mega. And lastly, you are supposed to have 2 Z Crystal users that you're allowed to use. You can use either one during a battle, and no other Pokemon can hold a Z Crystal. That's the shortest way I can describe it. This is week 1. I'm playing against Geno, and like I said, the Realgam Tower Tyranitars. And here's the team breakdown. Geno's team is up at the top. Some notable threats are Mew. Mew is really scary because it can run every single TM in the game. It's also one of his Z Crystal users, meaning that he can run it very diverse move pool options. Worth noting, Medium Z is banned, so he can't bring that, but he can run it defensive, which often on OU ladder it is, but also he can run it offensively with that Z Crystal. That's the set I'm most scared of, so we'll talk about that later. He has his Salazzle as his other Z Crystal user, although this week I don't think I expect him to bring that as the Z Crystal user. I think it'll be Mew. Other notable threats are Lucario can be either special or physical with Sword Dance or Nasty Plot. Mega Altaria can be either physical or special with Dragon's Dance, or just a special attacking set. Also can be supportive, similar to Mew. And then its other Pokemon sort of round out different roles. Drapion is a relatively bulky kind of pursuit trapper, as is Sneasel, the less bulky. Lantern's a bulky water that can resist electric attacks. Xatu can reflect back Stealth Rocks. And then Hippowdon can set Stealth Rocks as well as be a bulky physical wall. And lastly, Celesteela is one of the best walls and defensive Pokemon in the game. And its sort of main set is very annoying to play against. So we'll talk about how I'm going to handle all that. Worth noting here, the team I think I'm gonna face against is probably some combination of Mew, Mega Altaria, Lucario, Celesteela, and likely Hippowdon. His last slot could be any number of those other Pokemon, except probably Xatu. So I would say Salazzle, Drapion, and Chestnut are probably the most likely. The other ones are less likely, although he could bring Sneasel, which might be annoying for me. It's also possible some of the other first 5 do not get picked, but I would be surprised if at least 4 of them don't. So let's go on to my team. I'm going to start with my first pick, as well as the first Pokemon I brought this week, which was Landorus Therian, Calrissian here. Basically, this was sort of the main idea here is that this is sort of like a Celesteela bait, where most of the time Celesteela can beat Landorus. This week I ran Smackdown, which if you're not aware what that does, Smackdown's a rock move that when it hits your opponent, it grounds them, meaning that if they're a flying or levitating Pokemon that normally is immune to Earthquake or ground moves in general, for until they switch out, ground moves can hit them, which means that I can then turn around and one-hit KO Celesteela a decent amount of the time, or at least very, very heavily damage it. U-Turn is there to provide, switches to other Pokemon. The EVs, it also runs Defog because it's very important that Charizard on my team does not take rocks damage, and this helps me prevent that. The speed investment here, if you notice, 248 speed EVs. Because I'm 91 base speed, that allows me to just outspeed max speed Lucario. Which is really helpful because that means that I can switch in on it and one-hit KO it with Earthquake, which is really, really important, and it can't stop me. It can chunk me with special or physical attacks, and it might be running some weird coverage moves for like HP Ice potentially, or I don't know if it gets Ice Punch. I'll have to look that up, but that can be scary, so I'll have to kind of scout out its moveset ahead of time, but that can be a a really important switch in. But that was the main goal for the speed EVs. Attack investment is so that you can one hit KO the Lucario, Drapion, the Salazzle. It also helps in getting very close to one hit KO after a smackdown on Celesteela. Yeah, main idea here is defog, Earthquake, Smackdown, and then, like I said, turning out with U-turn. I used a sort of like a weird hybrid. I decided to use leftovers for extra longevity, mostly because of Celesteela's Leech Seed. But yeah, that was the main idea behind the Landorus set. A little bit more offensive, not as much bulk, but it was necessary to sort of beat certain Pokemon that he had brought. Second Pokemon I want to talk about on the team is Shakti here, Hoopa U. This is one of my 2 Z Crystal users and the one that I decided to bring this week. I went with Electrium Z mostly for extra coverage against Celesteela. That can actually beat Celesteela without too much of a problem. And I didn't need the extra coverage move anywhere else. Originally I had Phytinium Z, but I realized that doesn't actually help as much as I thought it did initially, so I switched it. Nasty Plot is mostly there for late game situations against his team, unless he builds it really defensively, which I hope he does, because I think my team matches up better if he is. But if he brings like the more offensive versions of Mew and Altaria and things of that nature, then mostly going to be trying to just chip damage everything with attacks with my enormous special attack stat, 170 base plus modest nature plus 252 investment. Speaking of the investment EVs, the speed, I realized in draft format, you know exactly what Pokemon your opponent have. So in a wide open format where you can play anyone playing any Pokemon, you usually have to run maximum speed investment and a plus speed nature to get to as fast as you can go, so that you're not behind in speed wars. However, at 80 base speed, the only other Pokemon in that ballpark that he has is Mega Altaria. And most Mega Altaria are going to be running, plus. I don't really want my Hoopa U to come in against Altarias because they always bring Earthquake. Even the special variants bring Earthquake, and I don't match up well anyways. And so I basically just put 4 speed in there because if he runs support Altaria specifically, which almost always runs minimum investment in speed, very similar to how I'm running it, I can speed creep it by 1 and we can tussle there. But any of the offensive versions of Altaria, I didn't feel necessary to outspeed because I don't really want to be 1v1ing them anyways. So that means I could put extra bulk into my HP and special defense, which lets me tank better hits from Mew. This is my primary Mew switch in. It's also going to be stressed out a lot because if Mew is running Phytinium Z off of Focus Blast, which is not very common, I don't think, but he might bring it if he realizes how good it could be. It can potentially one-hit KO me. Especially, it can do a lot of damage with like Stealth Rock damage, so I have to be very careful. But this is my main switch into Mew. It's a little scary because I think if this goes down and he still has Mew at really high health, I'm in trouble. But this is the best I had, so that was going to be the plan. But yeah, Hoopa U, huge wall breaker. If in the late game scenarios he doesn't have any really good physical attacking Pokemon left, this Pokemon can just absolutely wreck things. So main thing though is against Mew. So next thing I wanted to talk about was probably my best Pokemon in this matchup, Mega Charizard X. It's a little misleading because it's going to show regular Charizard there, but if you notice, it has the Charizardite X. With this Pokemon, the main reason I don't think he can realistically bring defensive Mew is that if he does, this thing sets up in its face, and it doesn't care about Will-O-Wisp because it's fire type. Usually it's running like coverage moves like Ice Beam and supportive things like Stealth Rock and healing like Soft Boiled, and I'll just set up in its face because it does nothing to me. So if I just scout out he's defensive Mew, this is going to hard switch in almost every time. That being said, I decided to go for a little bit of a weird set. Originally I was running Dragon Dance, but I realized, very similar to how the Hoopa U situation was, the only Pokemon in my speed bracket was Mew, and if he's offensive Mew, I want nothing to do with that matchup. And if he's defensive Mew, he's not going to run speed investment, so I don't need to either. As far as I can run, I don't have to run Dragon Dance specifically. I still wanted the speed for other situations, but that was the main thing that I didn't need to worry about. So the speed helps me outspeed like max speed Jolly Lucario or whatever. So that's the main reason I still had to run some amount of speed. The other thing was I decided to go for Swords Dance because of that. I don't need the extra speed to be able to beat certain speed tiers, and if he runs like Choice Scarf Salazzle, I can't outspeed that anyway. So that part I was not really super concerned about. So I went with Swords Dance again. The cool thing about Swords Dance is, say I don't Mega Evolve against him, and he brings in Hippowdon, which has come up in testing. If I Swords Dance, then he has nothing that can touch me except Toxic, unless he's bringing a Rock coverage move, which we'll find out. But he probably anticipates me Mega Evolving and be able to Earthquake me. If I don't Mega Evolve, I can Swords Dance again, and then I can one-hit KO with Flare Blitz, which is nutty. So that was the main reason for Swords Dance. Roost is there for extra longevity, because I anticipate taking things like Sandstorm damage from Hippowdon. I might have to switch into Rocks, especially after I Mega Evolve. That's a little bit more realistic than before I Mega Evolve, where I take a lot more damage. But if I can avoid that, I can really sweep. And I didn't need the Dragon coverage move because it's actually not that good against this team. He's got like Celesteela, Lucario, Mega Altaria is immune to it. A lot of his Pokemon don't give a crap about Dragon moves compared to Earthquake or Flare Blitz, so I just didn't feel like it was necessary to run an extra coverage move. So I just went ahead and just used Swords Dance for extra power. I'm really excited because I think this thing can really do a lot of damage if I keep it healthy. And that brings me to, I'm going to skip down to the bottom of the what you see on the right hand side. Brings me to Celebi here. Celebi is really, really, really important, and I didn't initially realize I needed it. Originally, I had Scizor in this slot. Or I guess originally I had Neolego, and then basically I had Scizor and Neolego in, and then I switched out Neolego for Celebi, and then I realized that I needed Neolego for Scizor, so I switched those. So long story short, Celebi's on the team. Main reason why is it beats his most likely Stealth Rock Pokemon, which is going to be Hippowdon. One-on-one, it can OHKO with Grass Knot with this investment in Special Attack and Life Orb. It will always OHKO with Grass Knot, which is huge. Keeps Stealth Rock off the field if he decides to lead Hippowdon. Now, if he brings Mew, well, this doesn't face off that great against Mew, like defensive Mew. The good news is I can beat defensive Mew more easily that way. I can probably just hard switch into Charizard every time. So this specific Celebi was in sort of concession to beating Hippowdon. The other cool thing is this gives me some extra options against Lucario. The speed investment allows me to outspeed Lucario, and it also allows me to outspeed Drapion that is Choice Banded. So originally I was only going to try to outspeed Lucario, which is a little easier. I could use an extra 40 EVs and HP or some other defensive stat. But I realized that I needed to also be able to beat Drapion speed-wise, because if he switches in Drapion, I can Earthquake, or sorry, not Earthquake, Earth Power does like 95 to 105 or something like that. And after Stealth Rock will always kill. So that was really important to be able to outspeed Drapion's if I didn't predict a good switch, like if I, Stealth Rocked or whatever and he switched in Drapion. Now, if he brings in Sneasel, which I don't necessarily anticipate, but he might, I'm going to have to be a lot more skittish with Celebi. I can't really just sit in there all the time because I really don't want anything to do with that Sneasel. But if he doesn't bring Sneasel, I'm a little bit more safe. Grass Knot over Leaf Storm, because Grass Knot still always OHKOs Hippowdon, and if he brings Lantern, which is his other Grass Weak, Earth Power actually deals with that just fine. It won't OHKO, but it's going to do a lot. So also Energy Ball did not do enough to OHKO, and I really want to be able to stop Stealth Rock's one-on-one if he decides to just YOLO and go for it. So that was the main idea. Special Attack investment was needed for that. Timid was needed to outspeed the two previously mentioned things. The rest of that extra EVs that I did not need in speed go into HP. And then Dazzling Gleam, by the way, helps against Altaria in some situations, but it's not my best switch in for that. So last two Pokemon on the team, the one I'm actually most excited to talk about really quickly is Comfey here. Comfey basically was engineered to beat Altaria. The HP plus defense investment allows me to take a +1 after a Dragon's Dance return with Pixelate and live at like 0.7 HP, so like a few HP, like 0.7%. So that means that if he goes Dragon's Dance, I can actually go switching on the Dragon's Dance, Dazzling Gleam, do like 60%, Draining Kiss will kill him in one shot, and because of Triage, any healing move, including moves like Draining Kiss, are priority, meaning that I get to use them first. So that's huge against the Dragon Dance. And it also means that the only, obviously, if there's Stealth Rock on my side of the field, which I'm pretty confident I can keep off the field, but if there is, I can instead go for Draining Kiss, which still has a chance to two-shot by itself. But the cool thing is if I had Stealth Rock up against him, then the double Draining Kiss still kills. So, and because the Draining Kiss is going to heal me to full, even if I took Stealth Rock damage or Sandstorm damage, it's irrelevant. I'm going to be at full. So I still will be able to tank that. So I was really excited about this set. Grass Knot is for helping against Hippowdon, although it's not really my primary switch in, especially because I just need it to switch into Altaria. And Leech Seed was because I realized that if he gets wise to the fact that I have this as a counter to Altaria, which he may not realize because it's a bit of a, like, he probably just gonna be like, oh, I can probably kill this thing, no problem. But because he may or may not realize that, if he does realize it and he switches out, the first time I'm going to still try to go for the kill, Dazzling Gleam. But if it happens again in the later part of the game, what I can do is, if I think he's going to switch, I can Leech Seed. And Leech Seed punishes his switch-ins, common switch-ins like Lucario and Celesteela, that I think he's going to keep switching into this thing. And I just needed something in that slot so that if I brought this in against the Altaria and he was wise to it, I wouldn't get punished on the hard switch out. So I figured this was a good option. Yeah, that was pretty much the idea behind that. The double fairy move is a bit weird, but it really helps with lining up against the Altaria, and that was really what it was in for. Notably, I did not have to run Defog on this Pokemon because I switched in Celebi to get Stealth Rocks, which freed up Landorus to use Defog instead of Stealth Rocks. That was really important because I didn't want to keep having to bring Comfy in to defog away rocks for Charizard, because I needed this for Altaria, and it had a bit more important job to do that was specialized. So I needed a different defogger, and it just lined up perfectly the way I did it. So I'm really glad that I decided to go for Celebi, because that helps Comfy do its one job. Pixie Plate also for extra damage. I couldn't have done Life Orb because of the recoil. Last Pokemon on the team, Neolego. Neolego was basically like an 11th hour switch. Originally it was Scizor, as previously mentioned. I had swapped out Celebi, the Neolego out for Celebi in, because I didn't think it was going to be that good. Then I realized last minute that Neolego does what Scizor was trying to do, which is revenge kill Altaria and other weakened opponents that were not necessarily with Bullet Punch. This does it better because it has more coverage options and it's fast. With Choice Scarf, it outspeeds everything on his team, even a +1 Altaria. +1 speed Altaria with Dragon Dance, this still outspeeds it. The only exception to that is Choice Scarf Salazzle or some weird Sneasel variant, and neither of those I don't think are going to be, we're not going to be rumbling, because I beat up on the Choice Scarf Salazzle anyways. This thing can't be touched by Salazzle because it has enormous special attack. So the speed investment 172 is just enough to beat, speed-wise, unboosted Salazzle and Altaria +1. Max special attack for most damage, and yeah, the rest in the special defense, because that was going to be my best bet in tanking any amount of attacks. I really don't want to hard switch this into very many things, but it's going to be a decent revenge killer for medium to low health opponents. Thunderbolt for Celesteela, Grass Knot for Hippowdon, as previously mentioned, Power Gem for Salazzle, and Sludge Wave for Altaria, and Chestnut and things like that. So really not my strongest member, but it has a specific niche to fill for revenge killing. So I really hope if I can keep things getting whittled down by good switch-ins and just dealing out damage with things like Hoopa U, punishing, just dealing out random damage on switches, that will really help Neolego's job out a lot. So it's not going to sweep, but it's going to hopefully help with that spot. Yeah, so that's the overall team idea. I'm really excited to play against Geno and get the ball rolling on this league. If you guys have any questions, criticisms about the layout of this, feel free to mention it. I tried to keep it shorter. I actually redid the take because my first one went on like another 15 minutes. So thank you guys for watching, and if there's any other things you're interested in, yeah, leave me a comment. Peace.